Anxiety and worrying often wears the mask of preparation that convinces us we're being smart, that we're staying ahead. But more often than not, it's just fear running simulations, trying to control outcomes we can't predict. We get caught looping through scenarios, fixing problems that don't exist, bracing for storms that may never come. It's strange how much energy we pour into a future that's only alive in our minds.
We spend so much time bracing for impact, flinching at outcomes that haven't even arrived. Our minds turn into battlegrounds, full of imaginary arguments, worst-case scenarios, and silent panics. It feels productive, like we're staying ahead of life, but really, we're just exhausting ourselves with shadows. You stay up at night trying to outthink every possibility, rehearsing responses to problems that don't exist yet, but fear disguised as planning doesn't create safety, it just drains your presence. It hijacks your peace and convinces you that you're being responsible when really you're just stuck in survival mode. And if you look back, how many of those emergencies ever came true? How many moments did you miss just trying to outrun a disaster that never arrived? The truth is, you handled what needed handling not because you worried, but because you showed up. Letting go of worry doesn't mean giving up. It means trusting yourself enough to meet life when it comes, not before. It means choosing clarity over chaos. And when you stop feeding fear with your focus, something changes. You begin to feel lighter, not because life is easy, but because you're no longer carrying every possible version of it on your back. Most of the time, we don't even realize what we're doing. The mind gets scared, and instead of admitting that, it jumps into overdrive, creating endless mental checklists, hypothetical conversations, worst-case scenarios. It feels productive, like we're being responsible, like we're preparing, but really, we're just trying to soothe fear with thought. It's a coping mechanism disguised as logic, a constant attempt to predict what might hurt us so we can dodge it before it lands. But that's not control, that's a performance, a loop. The brain keeps spinning, thinking that if we anticipate everything, we can somehow avoid pain. But all we're doing is living inside a simulation of suffering that hasn't even happened. We lie awake at night running mental drills for crises that haven't occurred. We brace ourselves for outcomes that may never exist. And in the meantime, life, the actual living, breathing moment, moves right past us. We miss joy, we miss connection, we miss peace. Not because they're absent, but because we're not here to receive them. We're too busy trying to outsmart what-ifs. And if you really look, you'll see it. Most of the things you were terrified of last year, they didn't happen. The ones that did, you handled them. Not with endless worry, not with perfect plans, but by being present when they arrived. Worry didn't save you, your ability to show up did. That's the paradox. The more we try to control the future, the more we lose access to our strength in the present. We become so tangled in imagined problems that we don't see the opportunity standing in front of us. We confuse preparation with panic. We confuse constant thinking with clarity. But real clarity is quiet. It doesn't shout over fear. It waits for fear to pause. The real shift begins when you stop asking, how do I avoid everything going wrong, and start asking, what if I'm capable even when it does? That's where power lives, not in perfection, but in presence, in knowing you don't need to have everything figured out to move forward. You just need to breathe, to ground, to take one honest step at a time. That's what builds real confidence, not rehearsing life, but engaging with it, not controlling every variable, but trusting yourself enough to meet what comes. And once you stop feeding the spiral of worry, something strange happens. You feel clearer. Not because the world has changed, but because you're no longer interpreting everything through the lens of fear. Suddenly, you don't feel as reactive. You're not constantly in defense mode. You move differently, slower but more intentional. Your energy softens, your tone calms. You stop needing to prove you're prepared and instead become someone who can adapt in real time. That's presence. That's power. And people feel it. They feel the steadiness in you, the groundedness. You stop leaking energy into battles that don't exist and start investing it where it matters, into your creativity, your relationships, your well-being. You stop letting imagined futures steal the peace available to you right now.
And maybe that's the lesson worry never wanted you to learn, that you were never meant to live in constant tension. That strength isn't built through anxiety, but through presence, that you don't have to suffer your way into safety. You can be steady without being scared. And once that lands, once you finally trust that not every unknown needs to be feared, not every silence filled, not every future controlled, everything starts to open up. Not because life is easier, but because you are. Anxious thoughts have a way of magnifying the smallest details into heavy burdens. One unanswered text suddenly feels like rejection. A moment of silence makes you believe you're falling behind. A slight change of plans convinces you the whole day is unraveling. But what if you didn't attach meaning so quickly? What if things were simply what they are? Neutral, temporary, not about you. That's when life starts to feel lighter. Not because you've tightened your grip on everything, but because you stopped coding every experience with fear. One of the most liberating choices you can make is to stop letting worry be the narrator of your story. You don't have to overthink every step ahead. You don't have to rehearse every worst-case scenario. You don't need to prepare for 1,000 what-ifs. The strongest people you'll come across often seem steady, even in uncertainty, not because they've mastered the world, but because they've stopped letting their minds create horror stories about the unknown. They understand something simple. Worry is just the mind's attempt to control a future it was never built to hold. And the moment you stop obsessing over what could happen, you finally free yourself to notice what is happening. That's where clarity grows. That's where you start making grounded choices. That's when your body feels less weighed down, your relationships feel less clouded, and your days feel less like battles against invisible enemies. Worry survives on imagined tomorrows. Peace, on the other hand, only exists here, in this moment. And once you taste that peace, even briefly, you realize something profound. The outside world didn't shift. You did. That shift changes everything. It's a quiet kind of power most people overlook, the power to let things remain uncertain, to not demand instant answers, to move forward without needing every outcome guaranteed. Because life isn't meant to be a flawless script. It moves in fragments, in pauses, in surprises. Sometimes the wisest response is stillness. That can feel impossible when your mind is wired to fill every gap with fear. But the very moment you start noticing that impulse, the rush to fix, to predict, to solve, you also gain the space to question it. Why am I so quick to chase resolution? What am I afraid of if I just pause? Who told me peace only arrives after everything is in order? That's the illusion worry sells you, that calm is a reward for control. But if you wait for life to line up perfectly before you allow yourself to rest, you'll spend forever holding your breath. Real peace isn't in the future. It's in the now.
You start to reclaim your energy, your creativity, and your sense of direction. Life begins to flow more easily, not because of luck, but because you've stopped swimming against the current and learned to move with it. On the surface, your circumstances might not look any different, but inside, everything shifts. You feel steadier, clearer, less hungry for certainty, and more open to what could unfold. That's when life begins aligning itself naturally, not because you forced outcomes, but because you allowed yourself to stop pressing so hard and started trusting the quiet within you. Most people never pause to ask why their minds never stop spinning. They treat it like background noise from a machine that never shuts off. But here's the hidden truth. A restless mind isn't necessarily a powerful one. It's often just a survival-trained mind, stuck in constant alert mode, not truly living. We've mistaken anxiety for drive. We've confused restlessness with ambition. And somewhere along the way, we started believing that if we're not endlessly analyzing, we must be doing something wrong. But endless thinking doesn't mean growth. More often, it means your body is locked in overdrive, recycling the same fears dressed up in new costumes. The uncomfortable truth is this: worry gives you the illusion of engagement with life. It makes you feel like you're preparing, managing, staying ahead. But in reality, worry keeps you watching from the sidelines instead of stepping fully into the game.
When you notice yourself slipping into that spiral, and instead of feeding it, you pause, that's when real change begins. You're teaching your body what safety feels like, even when everything isn't neatly in place. You realize that safety isn't some future reward you'll earn once life is perfectly organized. It's something you cultivate in the present, the moment you stop labeling uncertainty as danger. You don't need every answer lined up. What you need is to stop confusing thoughts with truth. Fear showing up doesn't make it real. A possibility existing doesn't mean it deserves your peace. And choosing differently doesn't mean you've stopped caring. It means you're caring with more wisdom. You guard your energy like the treasure it is. You treat your attention like the finite resource it's always been. You stop giving the loudest thought in your head the power to drown out the rest. And you start tuning into the softer voice, the one that whispers, "It's okay not to know. You're safe right here." From that place, something shifts. Intuition sharpens. You sense what's right without dissecting every detail. You act without chasing approval. You loosen your grip on timelines and begin trusting life's timing. The pace of the world won't always slow down, but you will. And in that pause, you find a strength that doesn't need to shout to be steady. These days, what's truly rare is a quiet mind, not because everything outside is calm, but because it's no longer at war within itself. That kind of peace doesn't come from micromanaging every detail. It comes from refusing to carry what was never yours. Because most of the heaviness you feel isn't about reality. It's the stories you've added, the imagined scenarios, the unspoken expectations, the pressure to meet standards you never even chose. And all of that can be set down. You don't have to untangle every problem before you're allowed to breathe. You don't have to predict every outcome before you give yourself permission to rest. All you need is the awareness to see when fear is pulling at you and the courage not to follow it every time. This isn't passivity, it's wisdom. It's knowing when to stop gripping so hard. It's learning how to walk through life open instead of armored, grounded instead of frantic. Because the moment your energy shifts, life responds differently. People sense it. You sense it. And it isn't magic. It's simply you showing up as yourself. Not the perfected future version, not the overmanaged, over-edited version. Just you, trusting that when the next thing arrives, you'll meet it fully, not a moment before. And that's when life begins to fall into place. Not because it suddenly became effortless, but because you stopped weighing it down. You're not here to think yourself into exhaustion. You're here to live. So let's keep choosing that, together.